Hi everyone, today we will be talking about the content for Module 4, which addresses Latina's identity and terminology. And I first wanted to take a minute or two to address some um, minor administrative issues and to encourage you, if you have any questions or concerns, to email me or send me a message via Canvas. As many of you are aware, I am pretty responsive and I try to respond to you within 24 to 48 hours. So a couple of things, take a look again at Canvas to view your grading. As I shared previously, there are some issues with grading some items in Canvas, and I have revised the grades for everyone that has completed the quiz on cultural humility. The quiz that is for the module on, let me just double check the title that I gave the quiz just to make sure that I am not. That would be quiz number 3, which is just labeled quiz number 3. I thought I had put a specific name on it. So quiz number 3, which is the quiz that comes after the cultural humility quiz, is you shouldn't have any issues with any of the responses because they are a selection or choosing a response instead of entering their response in using words or phrases. So you shouldn't have any issues. Again, for every quiz, I try checking to see how each of you is performing in the items, and I try to see if I'm seeing that over half of the class performed badly in one item. Sometimes I may pull out that item and not count it towards the grade because, again, it might be that it wasn't clear from the readings, or that there were some problems in me explaining or clarifying the concept. I haven't seen that so far. And I know sometimes students get a little bit anxious with grading, but just remember, we have multiple quizzes, we have multiple discussion board posts, we have our reflection papers, and like I said, at the end of the semester, I usually eliminate one quiz and I give students 2 bonus points for completing the course evaluation. If I'm seeing, I think I explained this earlier on in one of my first video, just to reassure you, if I'm seeing by the midterm that I have a student that's struggling a lot, or that I'm seeing that it's not completing assignments or posts or anything on time, I will approach that student individually just to make sure what I can do to support their learning and to explore if there's anything that's going on that may need to be addressed in order for the student to be successful in the course or in life in general. So just take a deep breath, because I know sometimes in some quizzes you do really great, maybe in the next one not so great, or maybe you do great but it's not exactly the grade that you are expecting. Just see the biggest picture and rest assured that I'm always tracking students' progress and ways that I can support your learning. So go ahead and check your grade again for the quiz on cultural humility, and if you have any questions, just let me know. The other thing that I wanted to touch base on were 2 other things. One is the fact that upon discussing it with the director of the program and other colleagues, it seems that I will not be allowing students to retake quizzes, and so far I haven't seen a trajectory in any single student that's consistently failing the quizzes. Like I say, if I see anyone that's in that track, I will individually have a conversation with this student and look for ways in which we can improve his learning and his grade. But so far, I haven't seen anything that's extremely concerning to me. I'm just gonna wait until a little bit longer, probably two or more quizzes, and see how you guys do in the reflection before we start getting worried or me contacting students to kind of ensure that they are adequately learning in this course. So quizzes are not allowed, we're not gonna allow for them to be retaken, but what I have seen also to reassure you is that in the first couple of quizzes, students don't necessarily do super great. Even though that's not the case in our course, I'm seeing a lot of you are doing quite well in the A, B range. A couple are a little bit below that, but that's expected. Usually students start getting the pace of it and start doing much better in quiz. That has been my experience and the experience of other colleagues. But don't worry, we will figure out if I'm seeing anyone that's falling behind or anything that's going on with you. I will specifically email or communicate with those students, and we will look for ways to improve your performance in the class. And finally, just to remind you that your first reflection paper should be submitted ideally sometime between I believe we agreed. I'm going to double check on that because I don't want to go ahead and tell you things that are not accurate. If I'm not mistaken, we agreed that the suggested due date would be either next week or no later than either this week or next week. So the latest that I wouldn't kind of suggest you to submit would be September 22nd. So you have all of this week and next week to submit your first reflection paper. I will be grading them as they come in. So rest assured that I'll grade them as fast as I can and within the course of those 2 weeks that you will be submitting them. As usual, if you have any questions, do not hesitate to contact me. And now moving on to context, I've already taken 7 minutes of this video addressing that. This might be a little bit of a longer video for us. I kind of wanted to take a moment to address a couple of things related to Latina identity and some of the readings that we have been doing for Module 4. There were 2 readings assigned, one related to kind of like how Latinos conceptualize or Latinas conceptualize themselves in the US and what are the variables or factors that influence their identity. And then another one, which is more a short description of a larger study from the Pew Center, kind of giving some important statistics and information about also how Latinas view themselves in the US. And there were a couple of interesting factors that emerged from them. And I guess the point that I really wanted to take home is one, that Latinos are not a homogenous group, right? Latinas, oftentimes we're bundled. And I think this can be applied to other groups as well. Like for example, other ethnic or racial groups, that there's a lot of variance within those groups, but somehow we collectivize them or lump everyone together. So Latinos, Latinas, Latinx, or any of those forms is a very heterogeneous group. And why is that? Because as one of the articles suggests, we gotta keep in mind that there are very important specific community, neighborhood, and country specific factors, right? Aside from like the general social factors that influence the behaviors and attitudes and beliefs of Latinos, Latinas in the USA. I, as a Puerto Rican, has a different experience than some of my students that may be Mexican, Chilean, Colombian, Dominican, Cuban, and so forth and so forth. So that is a very important thing to keep in mind, because in practice, and the goal of doing this videos is to also provide you some skills for your practice. Something that I usually recommend is to let your clients speak first and let them construct their identities with you. Do not assume that just because you have a Latino or Latino client, they may kind of understand beliefs and values and norms that are associated with Latino culture, like respect or respeto, familism or familismo, machismo. Do not assume that they understand them in the same way that you think they should be understanding them, right? Why do I say that? In one of the articles, remember that it tells us that we have also different migration experiences, and that will vary also on the generation that we're from, whether we were born in the US or not. How powerful is the influence of our families in us, how well we're able to adapt to the US culture, how much of the values from our countries of origin do we choose to retain. So as you can see, there are many factors that impact how Latinos, Latinas, Latinx will experience all these issues. And I think oftentimes, as clinicians, we might make the mistake of assuming that all Latinas experience machismo or Marianismo, or all Latinos subscribe to the values of respect. And that really will vary depending on your experience and your historical development and that of your family in the US. So it's very important to let your client construct their identity with you. And the best thing you can do is just ask the right kind of questions, open ended questions. For example, letting your client share what are their belief systems, how do that compare to their family belief system, how much culture influences that belief system, what are some of the norms that the client has that are culture specific, or what are some of the norms that might deviate from what his or her family expect to be values that are part of their cultural group. Questions such about talking about political processes, economic processes, religious processes, spiritual processes. This is very important. A lot of, not a lot, but I would say many of our clients also can come from indigenous or native communities in their countries, which sometimes are further marginalized or oppressed within those same contexts. So it is important to really ask open-ended questions about all the social variables that are reflected in the article that we read: religion, race, ethnicity, gender, the different values that are important for Latinos and Latinas. Let your client tell you how much it weighs on their beliefs and norms, and what are some of the clashes and conflicts that it has created with other family members. So I think that's one of my main recommendations and something that I wanted really to focus on, in terms of also working. And I know some of you have discussed this in the discussion board posts. How we are able to ask these open-ended questions, how we are able to explore these issues with clients, is also because we have gone through a process of education and self-reflection of what are our own unconscious or conscious biases, stereotypes, and judgments and values about a specific group. So I think a recommendation that I made in one of the posts that a student wrote is that at the end of each session, usually I try to take a moment after I'm done with the client to have a conversation with myself and explore what are the areas of comfort and discomfort that I experience. For example, if a client shared something about their machista experience, or about how her or his family have specific views about sexuality of men and women and how that has impacted her or his relationships. And for some reason I felt uncomfortable when discussing that with my client. I want to be able to have a reflection and a conversation with myself about what it was about it that made me feel so uncomfortable. Why it is that I decided maybe not to ask further questions to my client, what it is that I felt some negative emotions as the client was sharing this experience with me. And I think having that conversation with yourself, aside from also learning by reading and making your own research, but having those inner conversations with yourself will help you kind of start making conscious those unconscious biases and judgments and values that we have. Because by talking with you, and kind of bringing them to the consciousness level, you are giving them an open space for them to come out and the ability for you to reflect upon them. So keep that in mind as you're working with clients. I think is happens to all of us, that we just lump all Latinos and Latinas, and the same happens with other groups, as if they are one monolithic, homogenous identity, as if all, for example, Dominican or Mexican women have to experience machismo in the same way, or have to experience certain family traditions in the same way. And really, what I have seen with my students and my clients is that you may have, for example, a student that is a Latina female, has been born in the US, and has been raised here in the US. And I think the statistics from that article on the Pew Center reflected that not necessarily all Latinos, Latinas, Hispanics relate well to their Hispanic heritage. Some of them feel more aligned to the US culture because, first, this might be all they know. Second, it might be a mechanism for some Latinas and Latinos to avoid being associated with being Latino or Latina or Hispanic because of the stigma or shame that their families have shared, that identification of Latinos and Latinas, Hispanics carried for them. I don't know if I'm making sense here, but just to clarify, I've heard from some of my students, our client, how they conceal certain aspects of their Latino, Latina, Hispanic identity, because concealing those aspects of their identity makes them fit in more, makes them feel more accepted, makes them have more access to other things. It's very sad that things like this happen in this context, but reality is that we cannot assume that everyone is pride or connected with their Latino or Latina heritage. It really will depend on our own experiences and the experiences of our families, and there is no shame if you don't feel connected to your Latina or Latino heritage at this point in your life, because I think it really depends on where you are and what your experiences have been. So it's important for you not to make the same assumptions with other Latinas and Latinos, Hispanics, and any other racial or cultural group, because everyone experiences race, ethnicity, gender in very specific ways. And finally, another thing that I want to highlight is that remember that all these variables intersect. Think that you're in a cross street, and there's like an intersection. So that's pretty much how these variables work, right? You are not, let me see how I explain this in a simple way. You are not only Latina, or Latino or Hispanic. You are a heterosexual or homosexual, lesbian, Latino, or bisexual or queer. You might be also an atheist or a Christian or a Muslim Latina. You may also be a man or a woman Latina. You may also be a heterosexual Latino, Latina from a poor SES background. So see how all those variables come into place to shape who you are. So the ethnic or cultural component of being Latino is only one variable of these larger processes. We are at the crossroads of so many different variables. For example, for me, I identify myself as Latina, as Puerto Rican, as heterosexual, as Christian, as female, right? But you might identify yourself also as a Latino, but you might be in a very different intersection than I am. And why do I say that? Because I think we gotta keep in mind how those descriptors that we're using and those labels put us in position of privilege and oppression. For example, being a Puerto Rican heterosexual Latino might give me some specific privilege that maybe someone that considers or labeled themselves as a Latino, homosexual, Catholic, or Protestant woman would. So think about how your intersections or where you are situated or all these multiple identities impact your privilege and impact your spaces of oppression. This is a very rich conversation and topic, and I look forward to keep reading your discussion board post. So far, for the most part, they have been very rich and comprehensive. I'm really happy with what I'm seeing. And those discussion board posts that I think were missing some aspects, I kind of let the students know so that we can keep improving together for the next board post that we will be doing. So I hope that has kind of helped you add a little bit more of perspective. I guess my last thought, I think this is a larger topic on, well, Professor Diana, how do I address oppression and privilege in sessions? How do I start breaking down for a client? Because those are very complex terms, right? Oppression is such a charged word, and so is a privilege. And I think the best thing that I would recommend, do not make assumptions about how much your clients know and are able to learn. You can use complex words if you think your client will understand them, or you can use simpler terms to describe oppression and privilege and kind of ask questions, right? What are some of the questions that I can ask to obtain that information? For example, to discuss oppression and privilege, you can ask questions about access. What kind of access to social, economic, political resources the client has? How do the client feels about that access? What aspects do the clients do not have access, right? Where are the challenges in access? Those things let us know the level of oppression and privilege of a person. And it's a good starting point to also let our clients know that a lot of the so-called mental health or social problems they are experiencing, it's not something that they need to carry the burden alone. A lot of these problems are entrenched in their social cultural environment, and it is the responsibility of us as a society to address them. It is not the fault of our clients, the issues of accessibility, the issues of oppression, the issues of privilege. Oftentimes these variables are part of larger social processes, and if we help them understand that, that also makes them feel less burdensome, like they feel like they have less burden, and they feel that this is a larger problem that requires much more than their single attention. So we are already going long on this video. I'm going to keep addressing these issues on further videos, so I wish you a very beautiful and happy week. And as always, I am available via email and Canvas messages to answer any question. Have a beautiful, beautiful week. Bye-bye.